The moment you've been waiting for is about to happen right now. The start of the rebuild of the Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout. Let's go! How's it going, everybody? If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Greg Hitchko, and this channel specializes in dirt bike builds, moto how-tos, and product reviews. But in this video, it's the start of the rebuilds for the Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout. If you guys are just learning about the Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout, I highly suggest going into my channel, checking out the earlier videos. But I've got a Honda CR250, Kawasaki KX250, Suzuki RM250, and Yamaha YZ250. These are pretty much all the last gen model two-strokes that these manufacturers made. I'm throwing it back, doing a shootout like everybody loves. You see the new four-stroke shootouts that come out every year. You guys also love bike builds, so I thought what a great idea it would be to combine both of them into this crazy idea of this Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout. So if you guys are familiar with the channel, you obviously know that I had the Kawasaki already, done a rebuild with that, but it's almost coming up on a year from when I bought the second bike, which is the Yamaha YZ250. Bought that around just before Thanksgiving time last year, and let me tell you, I thought I was gonna be done with this project way before than I am now. And I did not expect to be starting it this late, but it is so hard to describe and try to quantify the amount of work that goes into one bike build, let alone four. It took me about 5 to 6 months with the Kawasaki overall, and I thought that if I really put my mind to it, that I'd be able to get this project done way sooner and not take almost over a year. But there's so much you have to go through. Little surprises pop up here and there that set you back, and especially with the moto industry just exploding due to COVID, I had to wait so long for parts, especially the Wrench Rabbit rebuild kits, so it just took a lot longer than I thought. And at one point, my wife Samantha made the statement that I actually just clean dirt bike parts and don't actually rebuild them, which is 100% accurate, since I feel like I spent days and days and days just cleaning and making sure these parts look brand new again so they can finally be put back together. So that being said, I still have the engine rebuild to do. The Kawasaki engine is actually completely buttoned up. I did a top end rebuild on that, filmed it for you guys. And believe it or not, filming everything is what takes the longest out of everything. But the way you gotta look at it when you have this many bikes and this many parts is just part by part, piece by piece. Take it one piece at a time, and a little added to a little becomes a lot. And here we are, finally putting these bikes together for the Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout. So I'll flip the camera around to give you guys an idea of what we're gonna be throwing on the bikes today. Basically, it's just gonna be a shell of everything. So I've got the forks, the shock, the linkages, the triple clamps, the swing arms, the subframes, and all the wheels. So that's what's gonna be going down in this video today. I'm excited to finally get these bikes looking like bikes again instead of just like a million parts sitting in my garage. It's pretty defeating at some points where you're just looking at all these parts and just trying to dig deep to find motivation to build these things. But now that these things are finally going back together and looking like bikes again, because you guys have been waiting a year just like I have to see these bikes come together. So every single fork, shock, linkage bearing has been rebuilt. Now I only replaced things that needed to be replaced. I wish I could say I went through and changed everything to make it brand new, but why go out and spend your money when you don't need to? You can make these bike builds affordable, and you don't have to go out and spend the money to make everything brand new. Cameron & Miller's Prime MX pads were a big help throughout this entire project, making sure I got all the axles and bolts cleaned up, including the linkage, the knuckle, and the arm, including the shock bodies as well. That's why everything is looking so fresh and brand new. Thank you to Brent Griffiths for Cerakoting these shock springs, making them all look uniform and neat. They're gonna look awesome on the bike. So as far as the fork and shock internals go, they all got new fork seals, bushings, seal heads, so these things are ready to go, ready to rock. And then ProAx also provided the necessary bearings that I needed for the linkage arms and the knuckles as well. I can't forget that when we rebuild shocks on our own, 99% of us don't have a nitrogen setup. And if you don't know, your local shop should be able to charge these shocks with nitrogen. So I took these down to Moto Experts here in Spanish Fork, Utah, got them all charged up, and these things are ready to go. So moving over to the frames and the wheels now. So this Honda frame I got cleaned up the old fashioned way using scrub brushes, Prime MX pads, simple green, just a lot of elbow grease to get this thing looking brand new. And those are methods that you guys can use at home to clean up those frames. The Kawasaki frame and the Suzuki frame were powder coated by Armor Coatings here in Salt Lake City. So this color is gonna be kiwi green. I know James Stewart's 05 bike had a silver frame, but you guys voted on it on my Instagram and thought it would be cool to see a green frame James Stewart SR250, and I think it's gonna look super rad. I've never seen anybody do that before. And then as far as the Suzuki RM250 frame goes, for Ricky Carmichael's Makita Suzuki, let me see if I can get a better lighting on here. It's kind of dark. But this thing has been coated gloss black with Adams Gold flake in it, and you can see the flake right there and the side spar. And let me tell you guys, I am most excited to see the Suzuki come together. And then as far as the YZ250 frame goes, I've got a Weekend Warrior Vapor Blaster that I stuck this frame in and vapor blasted the crap out of it to make it look brand new again. And I got a lot of help out of that Vapor Blaster as well in terms of getting everything prepped up and ready to go. So the wheels, the Yamaha hubs, the Suzuki hubs, not the Kawasaki hubs. The Kawasaki hubs are still actually fine. So the color here is the stock magnesium color. And then the Honda hubs as well. I got all those hubs powder coated at Armor Coatings as well. So the hub color here on the Honda is called Lollipop Red. Moving over to the Suzuki, this is a silver ore color. And then as far as the rear goes, that is a bronze chrome color. And then as far as the Yamaha wheels go, this is called a Montana Gold, kind of like the champagne color. It's a lot darker when it's not in the light, but when you get these things out in the light, this color really lightens up. And it's exactly what I was going for this Chad Reed YZ250 build. As far as the tires go, Dunlop hooked it up with all MX53 front and rear tires. I've been a long time Dunlop user, and if you guys know, these tires are the tire of choice for a lot of these pro teams in the pits right now. I've also just really had great success with this MX53 front tire, especially out here in Utah with these harder pack conditions. They work great. The rear tire as well is a great option if you guys are doing some single track or hitting those tracks later in the day when the tracks are more blue groove and hard pack. That rear tire works great. Or the combo that I ran on the Kawasaki was the MX53 front and the MX33 rear. So during those morning rides when it's a little bit more wet and deeper at the track, the MX33 works great, but still works and hooks up well when the track gets hard pack at the end of the day. And the last thing to touch up on are these triple clamps, swing arms, and subframes. They were either touched up with my Prime MX pads or thrown in the Vapor Blaster to get looking brand new again. So at the end of this video, we're gonna end up with a skeleton of these bikes, and I cannot wait to get them looking like dirt bikes again. Oh yeah, one last part. So I got all the bolts to the triple clamps, the forks, etc. I've got the foot pegs, and then the handlebar mounts, all this stuff ready to go. And to give you guys an idea, just to prepare all this stuff to get it clean and ready to go, took me 1 day. So overall, I'm just really happy to be at this point and finally get these bikes back together. So enough of me blabbering, let's finally get them together. So the first thing I want to start with is throwing the steering stem bearing races into the Kawasaki and the Suzuki frames. So I had to get those removed when I got these frames powder coated. Now the bearing races on both the Honda and the Yamaha were still in great shape, so I didn't need to replace those. But if you guys did see the teardown of this RM250, I had so much trouble getting the bottom triple clamp out of the steering tube here. So I went ahead and just bought new bearings for that. So we got brand new races here and bearings for the Suzuki, but the rest of the bearings for the other bikes were good to go. So let's get the races into the bikes. So to get these things installed, we're gonna start with some type of heat like a torch, some Maxima waterproof grease, and I've also got this Motion Pro steering stem bearing race driver tool, and then along with the bearing races that I've had sitting in the freezer overnight. So with these races being frozen, hopefully they kind of shrunk up a little bit in the freezer, so it's a little bit easier to get them in, and then hopefully the heat will expand the head tube a little bit on these frames to help those bearing races slide right in, along with a little help from the Maxima grease as well. So I'm sure most people are gonna have their bikes fully assembled with just the front end torn down, but for my project, I've got just the bare frame here. I could probably benefit from one of those scissor stands that hooks onto your foot pegs, but this is the cheapest way that I found to keep the frame on the stand. So this Motion Pro tool is what I use to drive the bearing races into the frame. Now it comes with a couple of these couplers. So on big bikes, you're gonna need the 55 to 56 millimeter coupler, and then the other side of it has the 51 to 52 millimeter coupler. So just basically a little bit smaller and a little bit larger. So on the Kawasaki, I've got two different bearing races, one larger one smaller one. So the 55 to 56 millimeter coupler is gonna fit in there nicely. It tapers in there nicely, so you're able to drive the bearing race in there smoothly and evenly. So I can't remember what I said, but that's the bottom one and this is the top one. The top race is a little bit smaller. So then we'll take it off and flip it over and use the 51 to 52 millimeter size. And then that's just gonna catch on the lip of that race as well, and then drive that race evenly into the frame. So let's give it a shot. And then also guys, if you have a mini bike, this tool comes with a 47 to 48 millimeter race driver, and then a 41 to a 42 millimeter race driver as well. I forgot to mention, grab yourself a sweet hammer as well. So I'm gonna start with the top, and first step is to torch the inside of where the race goes. Then take that Maxima grease and grease the crap out of the bearing race. Go ahead and evenly position that smaller race onto the frame. Then with the Motion Pro tool set up with the 51 to 51 millimeter head facing out, use the hammer to drive that bearing into the frame. And then flip the head of the Motion Pro tool over and then do the same process for the bottom one. Now for the bottom one, if your bike is completely assembled, you're just gonna have to leave it on that frame. You're not able to flip the frame over like I can with this one, with just a bare frame, but you should have enough weight with everything else assembled on the bike to drive that bottom race into the frame with the bike completely assembled. So there we go, we got these races installed. So me and this Kawasaki frame have had some bad luck in the past. I'm gonna show you a video right now of my frame actually falling off the workbench during my first rebuild of this project. When I was installing the steering stem bearing races, I was trying to install the bottom one. I flipped the frame over on the workbench. I stepped away for 2 seconds and there goes the freshly powder coated frame tumbling off of the workbench onto the floor, and you can hear me swearing. That was probably the lowest point of that build, that I've never been more pissed while working on a dirt bike, because how disheartening is it to have a freshly powder coated frame fall off the workbench and onto the concrete floor? But we pick it up and we move on, but let's continue with these builds. All right guys, after a little bit of work, the Suzuki steering stem braces are now in. So what I'm gonna do now is actually go in order. So I'm gonna start with the CR250, throw the triple clamps on here and then go one by one. So I'm not gonna go through all these bikes and film all the triple clamps install. I'm just gonna film it on the CR250 and then move on to the next thing. I'll probably do the fork install on the KX and so forth, and the front wheel on the RM and then so forth. So let's get this triple clamp installed on the CR250. Let's go grab it from the parts table over here. There we go. That reminds me, I need to put the little Honda emblem back on here. Just gonna go ahead and drive grease into both of the steering stem bearings here. You just wanna work the grease down the stem into that bearing just like this, and make sure you kind of push the grease into where the needles are. And then don't be shy with this grease either on these steering stem bearings. So I just also, once I'm done driving the grease down in, I just like to put a nice little coat on the outside of it. With the other bearing that's off the stem, take a bunch of grease in your palm and then take the other bearing and just kind of work the grease into the bearing. You're kind of sliding that bearing into your palm where the grease is, and that's gonna drive grease into that bearing. Make sure you put a bunch of grease on both of the races as well, on the bottom as well as the top. Then throw the bottom triple clamp through the stem, throw the top bearing on. Then you got the rubber cap, then along with that first lock nut. Then go ahead and tap and get this thing snugged down. Followed by our top triple clamp, the washer, and nuts. So I'm not gonna torque this nut down just yet. I'm gonna wait till the triple clamps are in the forks and then go ahead and torque that down. All right, so we got CR, KX triple clamps, and then the RM triple clamps are ready to go. But guys, we already have to call an audible on the YZ triple clamps. So here is the issue that I ran into. So the triple clamp set that I was gonna put on it was from an 06 and up. And I'm not really sure if it came from a YZ250 or a 4-stroke, but I'm beginning to think it came from a 4-stroke bike, because when I went to install the 06 triple clamps onto this 05 frame, I just didn't have enough stem length popping out of this top triple clamp here. So what I'm running now is a bottom 05 setup with the top 06 triple clamp, and that seems to work perfectly, how that nut is nice and flush with that stem there. Unfortunately, this bottom triple clamp does not look good at all compared to my other Prime MX triple clamps. So what I end up having to do is take this off, and I'm gonna leave the top triple clamp this magnesium color because I think it would be cool looking two-tone. So I'm gonna take this bottom triple clamp off, hit it with the prime pads, smooth it up, take out the casting lines like you see here with the rest of the triple clamps. So here is a little behind the scenes look of me in my current state right now, trying to get those casting lines out of that YZ250. My freaking glasses are fogging up. I've got the buffer on the ground, being held up with a vise so it doesn't move on the ground. As you see here, my workbench spot is completely taken up. I've got no other workbench space, so I'm just getting it done on the ground. And honestly guys, that's what it takes. There's no special shops that I do this out of, that you have to do this out of. Just make it happen in your own garage or whatever situation. So I'm gonna get back to buffing this triple clamp right now. And then there is that bottom triple clamp all brushed up with the Prime MX pads. Quick little hour detour, but not that big of a deal. But cleaning up this bottom triple clamp is just gonna make it look factory and align with the builds that I'm doing here. So I'm happy to have gotten that cleaned up. Not too happy to have done that and waste an hour, but man, that bottom triple clamp looks so good, brushed up, no more casting lines in there, which is awesome. And then this top triple clamp is still gonna be rocking the 06 with that magnesium color. And the reason why I'm not throwing that 05 clamp on there, because you can see the handlebar mounts are actually mounted to that top triple clamp, and that's why I didn't wanna throw that on there. And this top triple clamp is a little bit more modern of a design, and it offers more handlebar flexibility as well. And in flexibility, I don't actually mean like flex of the handlebars, I mean being able to run different types of handlebars with different types of handlebar mounts. Otherwise, if you wanted to run an oversized handlebar with this, you have to actually have mounts that go into this, and then the bar is just super tall, so that's why I wanted to go with this 06 mount here. All right, how about we go ahead and get these forks installed on the Kawasaki next. So let me go over to the table here, and we're gonna grab the Kawasaki forks here. So I got the Honda, the Kawasaki setup, the Suzuki setup, and the Yamaha setup. Forks are over there because I had to call an audible with the triple clamps to make sure everything fit, and luckily everything does. So let's grab these Kawasaki forks and get them on the bike. So now time to check the fork height. I got my digital caliper here, and I like to run at least 5 millimeters with this Kawasaki here. So I would recommend kind of playing with your fork height and model. If it's a faster track, you want to drop the forks and then the triple clamps. Say it's a sand track, you want to get a little bit more stability, or if it's a little bit tighter track, kind of more like supercrossy, more jumpy, tighter turns, that's when you want to raise the forks up a little bit in the clamps so you can offer a little bit tighter turning for your bike. Put all these bolts in. It's also super important to make sure you're torquing down the pinch bolts too on these forks. If you torque them down too much, it's gonna cause too much rigidity in the front end. If you don't torque them down too much, well, obviously that's not safe either. So with this Kawasaki, I'm torquing down to 14.5 foot-pounds or 175 inch-pounds. Make sure you check the manual for your proper tightness as well. All right, taking a step back to admire the scenery. You got all the forks on the front ends. Probably not the most efficient way to do it, doing the front end first when you have an empty frame, because one, you have to have the frame strapped down in the center, and then once you have the triple clamps and forks on the frame, the bike is gonna wanna fall forward. So if you've noticed, I've got all the front wheels propping the frames up, but now it is time to put the front wheels on, so let's go ahead and do that with the Suzuki. Let's go ahead, get these bolts screwed in here. All right, parts are coming off the table, but let's go ahead and grab the RM front axle. Grab some of that Maxima grease. Let's throw a thin layer of coating of grease on that axle. Now you'll notice I don't have the front brakes on the bike yet. For the sake of this video, I'm just gonna get the front wheel on so the bike can help balance itself out. So I'm just gonna slide it through here, and this is kind of a pain in the butt, holding it with one arm. Go ahead and set the one side spacer in there. Slide the other in. So now normally putting front wheels on, there is a procedure on how to get this torque down right. So what you want to do is make sure the axle is through first. You want to torque down this nut right here, and then you want to tighten down and torque these pinch bolts on the right side or the brake disc side. Then what you want to do is take the bike off the stand, hold the brake, and kind of pump the forks up and down a little bit. And what's going to happen is on this left side here, or the rider's right side, this left side fork is just kind of going to naturally settle in its own spot. Then once that kind of happens, then you'll put the bike back on the stand. Then you'll get these two final fork lug nuts torqued up last. Okay, so this is actually a nice reminder of why we double check things, because if you notice what might be wrong here, not that it matters too much now, but the brake disc is on the right side rather than the left. I guess that's what happens when you build 4 bikes. But how about we don't make mistakes like that going forward? Just like that, front wheels are on. So obviously I'm gonna have to take them off to put the front brake on. But again, I just wanted to get these up and running just to balance the bikes on the stand. Now it's time to get that swing arm and the rear wheel on, but I am stoked how these are starting to completely look like bikes. Okay, since the linkage and the swing arms kind of go together as one, what I'm gonna do is do it for the YZ. So I'm gonna grab the link arm and the knuckle as well, grab the bolts for it, and throw all this stuff, the linkage and the swing arm, on the YZ. So let's go. There's the setup and the throne that I'm gonna be working from. I'm gonna throw on the link arm first, but with all these linkage bolts, you wanna make sure that there's a thorough amount of grease on them. You definitely don't want these seizing up on you. Should probably take that tie-down strap off first before I do anything. Now that the bike is a little bit more balanced on the stand. Once I get the swing arm and rear wheels, it won't be an issue at all. So now for the knuckle is gonna go on the link arm like this. So you're gonna have one bolt going to the center actually from this right side here. And then the shock is gonna be the one that kind of comes through the linkage and then bolt on the bottom here. And then this is gonna be the slot where the bolt goes through the swing arm. And then the 2 bolts here are the same exact length, so it's not gonna matter which one you use for which slot. So just pick a bolt, grease it up, and then throw it through the middle slot here to get it connected to the linkage. So next up, I'm gonna throw the swing arm on. So normally you don't do this until the motor is in, but to have a rolling chassis, I'm gonna put the swing arm on with the swing arm bolt. I'm just gonna take this off real quick and then throw the motor in, because the swing arm actually hugs the motor in all these bikes. So let's just kind of get that swing arm mounted up and make it a rolling chassis. So with that swing arm on, we can get the last kind of bolt situated in there, line up the linkage with the swing arm, and then all these linkage bolts here are gonna get torqued down to 58 foot-pounds. All right, so there we go. Swing arms are all on. So far this process definitely took the longest, just because you got the linkage underneath there and there's just a lot of moving parts to go with it. So checking out the Suzuki, moving over to the Kawasaki, loving that kiwi green frame. And then things are gonna start to tie together with these bikes once I get these rear shocks on, so let's get those done now. Another thing down, shocks are all on the bikes now. Scrolling from the Honda up to the Kawasaki, over to the Suzuki, and then finally the Yamaha. Next up, let's throw these wheels on. This thing's gonna be looking so good on the bikes. Let's get them on. But before I go ahead and put the rear wheels on, I'm gonna go ahead and slide the calipers on. I don't have the cables hooked up to them yet. I'm actually waiting on the Suzuki cables. But before I go ahead and put that rear wheel on, I almost forgot that I need to put my chain adjusters in the swing arm. So what I'm doing is applying a liberal amount of anti-seize to these bolts, because it is not a good situation when these bolts seize up into the swing arm. So little trick of the trade right there, throw some anti-seize on those bolts and you shouldn't have a problem with those bolts getting seized inside the swing arm. Now we're good enough to go ahead, lift the wheel up, throw the axle through. So then we can have a rolling chassis. All right, wheels are on. Let's check it out. Moving from the Honda to the Kawasaki. It just made sense for me to put the brake calipers on as well, just to kind of line everything up in the rear wheel. But so I still got the Kawasaki stock colors on the hub, which still looks great. I mean, that magnesium color looks so good. And then moving on to the Suzuki, man, I am most excited about this bike in general. And that bronze chrome powder coat looking really good on the hubs, and those yellow anodized stock rims that I did are looking sweet. And then finally moving over to the Yamaha as well. That Montana gold is gonna really lighten up in the light. All right, so the one thing I wanna do next is put these handlebar mounts on. We take care and get this Suzuki setup installed. I like this single mount on the top here. It really keeps everything in place and prevents your bars from twisting a little bit more when you go down. Might as well finish off the job today and put the handlebars on. So let's take this top cap off. But while we're on the subject of handlebars, I gotta thank Mika Metals for being a part of the Throwback two-stroke garage build shootout. So I've got 3 different bars here from them. This first one here is their Pro Series bar. So it's kind of like your Renthal twin wall bar, where it's got like the fat bar. It's a little bit thicker, as you see here through the bottom. It does require oversized clamps, 1 1/8 inch clamps, but this bar is still designed to flex to reduce your rider fatigue. So a lot of complaints about the Renthal twin wall is that it's super stiff and doesn't like to flex. And you feel a lot of vibration through the bars, so this bar is designed to flex while keeping high durability. The next bar we got here, see, it's a little bit different. It's actually their hybrid series bar. So it's like the Pro Series bar, but in the center here where the clamps mount, this mounts to 7/8 inch clamps. So you don't have to go out and buy oversized clamps. If you still want the durability of a thicker bar and that crossbar look, this is definitely your bar to go with. And then here up top, this is going to be the RM and the YZ bars. This is called the Raw Series bar, basically the standard fat bar that we're all familiar with. This bar is designed to have the most flex out of all the bars while still maintaining the highest of durabilities. And then as far as the bend goes, I went with the MC bar, which is considered the 999 bend. So the sweep is 55 millimeters, so it doesn't sweep back too much compared to like the CR bend or the Yamaha bend, which is 56 and 57 millimeter sweep. And it's also not as high as the other bars as well. The tips of the bars don't point to the sky, which I'm not really a fan of. Really like a flat bar that doesn't have much sweep. So this MC bar kind of satisfies both aspects. Then a little less sweep, a little less height. Even though I am a taller rider, I still like a low bar, surprisingly. All right, so with that being said, let's grab this Raw Series bar and let's throw it on the bike. So the reason why I didn't tighten down these bolts to the handlebar mounts yet is because I wanted to get the handlebars in there. Sometimes you kind of have to move them around a little bit, but I'm just gonna get them in there roughly. Here's that top mount for the bars. And I have bolts in my pocket. I think putting the handlebars on is really gonna tie everything together. It wouldn't have looked right without the handlebars on here. I normally like my bars kind of going even with the forks. I think that's a pretty standard setup. So I'm gonna adjust the bars to a little bit to get them aligned with the angle of the forks. So I moved the bars to that -1 setting, seems to be pretty in line with the forks there. And I'm not gonna be able to know until I actually get on the bikes with them completely assembled to tell the difference and where I actually want them set up. But this is a good starting point, I would say, for your standard bar setup. And obviously we can't forget the bar pad. I'm going to be showing you guys how to get your foot pegs installed. So this first step is going to be a little pro tip from Cameron and Milla. It's actually installing the pin for the foot pegs upside down, coming from the bottom and not coming from the top. This is because if there is a chance that you guys are riding in deep ruts, and if you install the pin from the bottom, that cotter pin could potentially get caught in those deep ruts and mud and rocks, potentially rip that cotter pin out, and that foot peg pin could eventually work itself out, and then you lose a foot peg. Chances of that happening are probably pretty slim, but I definitely like that idea. It kind of gives like a pro level prep to your bike, so I'm gonna do it on this one. So let's get this foot peg installed. It's kind of a pain in the butt to try to figure out how the spring goes, but the hook on the spring is gonna hook onto that foot peg just like that. And then we'll insert the foot peg into its slot, and then the other part of the spring is just kind of rest on the foot peg mount. So it's kind of a pain in the butt to put the foot peg pin from the bottom up because you kind of have to push the spring in and get everything aligned up. So pro tip, grab a screwdriver or some type of Allen wrench like I've got here, and then drive it through the foot peg like that so it holds everything together. And then what you can do with that pin is just drive it up from the bottom, start pushing, and then you can start pushing that screwdriver or Allen wrench out of there. It just kind of keeps everything aligned. Get that screwdriver or Allen wrench out of there, and then give that pin a final push all the way through. Then you just need a fresh washer and a cotter pin, and then you should be all good. Now it's definitely not the most aesthetically pleasing way to do it, but if you're looking for fit and function, this is definitely the way to go. So foot pegs are on. Thanks to Cameron and Milla for that little tip there. And I hope you guys also found value by using a screwdriver or an Allen wrench to help get that pin through, to kind of keep everything together in there while you're installing that pin. But during the video while I was putting this one on, I spent time putting the rest of the foot pegs on, so those are all good to go. The only thing we have left is the subframes for this video, so let's get that done right now. All right guys, of course we have to finish up with my beloved Kawasaki here. Definitely wasn't too bad to get these things on, as it's only 3 bolts. You got the bolt in the center of the frame there, and then the 2 bolts on the side of the frame spars. But we got some serious rolling chassis here, guys. There's a look at it from this side here. All right guys, so that is gonna be it for part 1 of this build series of the Throwback 2-stroke garage build shootout. And I gotta say, for my own sanity, I cannot be any happier that these bikes are starting to roll. I've got rolling chassis and parts are going back together. I think I was starting to go a little bit crazy there, that I just had boxes and boxes and boxes all over the garage and didn't know where to go. My head was spinning. So I finally, with all the clean parts that I had, needed to get these bikes together. And I really hope that you guys are stoked that this project has started to come along. Also, if you guys did not know, I think there's plenty of people out there that don't know this, but unfortunately for me, at the end of this project, I am not keeping a single one of the bikes that you see behind me. I'm going to be giving them away, and you guys are gonna have a chance to win each and every one of these bikes. So make sure you definitely subscribe to the channel and head over to my Instagram page @GregHitchGo to stay informed on the updates about that. Do not worry, you're not gonna miss it. It's gonna be a huge announcement when that raffle is going to occur. So the way I put the bikes together today is definitely not the most orthodox way that you wanna do it. I know, I understand that I'm gonna have to take parts back off to put other parts back on. But like I said, for my sanity, I just needed to get some rolling chassis together. And I've seen some cool pictures on Instagram and everything like that of rolling chassis like this. So I kind of wanted to do the same thing and also get content out for you guys. I also want you guys to be a part of the build as well. So leave a comment below. Tell me what your favorite part of the bike is and what bike you're looking forward to the most. Me personally, I'm kind of leaning yellow, even though I'm a Kawasaki guy. This RM is kind of pulling strings at my heart a little bit, but I know each and every one of these bikes is going to be so sick when they're all done. Before we go, I definitely have to thank all the companies that helped me out with this build. Pro X Racing Parts for the fork bushing, seals, shock seal heads, Prime MX, the Prime MX pads helped me so much to get these parts looking so good. Mika metal handlebars like you see in the back, I'm excited to use those as well. Armor coatings for all the powder coating that you see here today. If you guys need any powder coating done, I highly suggest them. They're out of Salt Lake City here and they do some phenomenal work. As far as tires go, Ride Dunlop baby, MX53s are out there, done all the bikes for the Shootout. I love an MX53 front and 33 rear. That combo has worked great, but what I like about this MX53 rear is that it's versatile in so many different situations. I can't forget Maxima racing oil, so all the axles and suspension bolts that I greased up today, that is the Maxima waterproof grease, and you're gonna see going forward all the Maxima products that I continue to use. As far as the shock builds go, I obviously did them in-house, but didn't have the nitrogen setup to get them done. So thanks to Moto experts here in Spanish Fork, Utah for charging those shocks with nitrogen for me. And guys, if you want your suspension done, serviced, or trick coatings, I would definitely recommend going to see those guys. Cameron over there is a really cool dude and he'll make sure that you have a great experience with those guys. But as for me, I've got 3 engines to build, the Honda, Suzuki, and Yamaha. I got to get those things back together. Like I said, the Kawasaki's all ready to go. But guys, if you enjoyed the content today, go ahead and punch that like button for me. It really helps out the channel. And I can't thank you guys enough for helping me through and keeping me motivated to get this Throwback 2-stroke garage build shootout done. As always, ride hard, be safe. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.